Coming up on One Detroit, stories from our Destination Detroit series. We'll hear how Chaldean Americans found success in the area. Also ahead, an African American family makes radio broadcasting history. Plus, we tell you about people who migrated to Michigan from eastern states. Dearborn's mayor recalls how his family settled in that city, and the past and future of Detroit's Chinatown. It's all coming up next on One Detroit.
Across our Masco family of companies, our goal is to deliver better living possibilities and make positive changes in the neighborhoods where we live, work, and do business. Masco, a Michigan company since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit PBS.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit PBS. Through our giving, we are committed to meeting the needs of the communities we serve statewide to help ensure a bright and thriving future for all. Learn more at dtefoundation.com.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.
Hello, I'm Zozette Gear, and this is One Detroit. Our Destination Detroit series tells the stories of the people who came to Southeast Michigan and helped shape the region's rich and diverse history. We're sharing some of these stories on this episode of One Detroit. First up, Chaldeans, who are Christians from Iraq, have lived in this area for more than a century. One Detroit's Bill Kubota spoke with a member of the Chaldean community, Jane Shalal, about her family's local business and her career as a police officer, attorney, and community leader.
Jane Shalal checking in on a Troy nonprofit helping people in need.
I've been with this organization for 35 years.
Another food distribution day.
Most of the people here that work at the United Community Family Services are Chaldean or Iraqi or refugees themselves.
Shalal recently retired as CEO of United Community Family Services, called the Chaldean Ladies of Charity when it started more than 60 years ago.
This is a nonprofit agency established by 20 women. They started it in 1961. Back then, we were helping new immigrants come to the United States and get them resettled. But as the refugees started coming in, we started responding to their needs. There's been a big influx of Ukrainian refugees, Afghan refugees, and of course still Iraqi refugees. And it's not limited to refugees.
The post-9/11 conflict in Iraq brought a more recent wave of Chaldeans. Shalal's Chaldean American story goes back a half-century before that.
So my dad was from Takaf. It's a small village in Iraq. There's 4 or 5 villages north of Baghdad that most of the Chaldeans come from. My dad was 13 years old, and he told his mom that he was going to America.
Aziz Shalal spent time in other countries before making his way to the U.S., arriving in Detroit in the 1950s. He worked in the grocery business.
He definitely had that business sense and that entrepreneurship skill.
Chaldeans owned a lot of stores in Detroit. They still do.
That's how Chaldeans came to the United States. They came here because they knew there were other Chaldeans here, number one, that could speak their language, and number two, that could help them get their businesses started. So a lot of Chaldeans went on to buy their own businesses. So it was like a pathway to success.
Jane Shalal, born in Iraq. She, along with her mother and siblings, joined her father in Detroit in 1960. Her citizenship ceremony made the newspaper. Around that time, her father bought his own grocery store.
It was 4-Star Supermarket on Jefferson in Detroit. Our entire family worked there. Even I worked there as a little kid.
The family would own more stores around town.
Although some of the bigger supermarkets and chain stores left, like Farmer Jack's, Chatham, Wrigley's, the Chaldeans stayed. And the supermarkets were basically the only food centers for the residents of Detroit.
In the late 70s, Shalal finished college.
I was going to go to law school, and then, I was surrounded by police officers at the time because I was getting my degree in criminal justice, and they go, "You should be a cop, Jane." And so I said, "No, I don't know, I'm going to law school." They said, "No." So they dared me, to apply to the Detroit Police Department. I was the first Chaldean police officer.
The first, she says, man or woman.
I think that because there was more women coming into the police department, it was more acceptable. But yeah, for the Chaldean community, that was a shock.
Shalal would go to law school, worked as a prosecutor, an assistant U.S. attorney, and as an administrator with the Attorney Grievance Commission. She'd lead the Associated Food Dealers of Michigan, looking out for local grocers, many owned by Chaldeans, of course.
A lot of Chaldeans move to where their churches are, because they're very religious and they're very faith-oriented. So the Mother of God Church was the original church, and so people started moving to Southfield.
Chaldean churches are Catholic of the Eastern Rite, similar to Roman Catholic, but with different rituals and traditions.
Chaldean population grew, and then there was other churches in Oak Park, West Bloomfield, other areas. Then you saw a large population going to the east side, like Sterling Heights, Warren, Shelby Township, because the population keeps growing, and it's a very strong faith-based population.
There's concern some Chaldean culture could be lost. Shalal's heard it from Iraqi refugees.
When they come over here, I was surprised to see about how many Chaldeans didn't speak Chaldean.
The Chaldean language goes back before the time of Christ. More often, Chaldeans now speak Arabic, as so many have spent years in Arab-speaking countries before getting here.
The Arabic people do not understand Chaldean. It was mostly a language spoken in the home, and it's been preserved that way. And it's actually on the National Geographic Endangered Language list.
What has been lost? Detroit's Chaldean town on the northeast side.
For quite a few years, it was flourishing. All along 7 Mile Road, there were a lot of Chaldean businesses, markets, and coffee shops, things like that.
In recent decades, residents and businesses slipped away, off to the suburbs. These days, 187,000 Chaldeans live in the region, according to the Chaldean Community Foundation, more than anywhere else in the U.S. Nationwide, there's about 500,000.
Now there's a big population in San Diego, California, and they've also expanded with the same businesses. They have a bunch of retail stores out there too, and then also they expanded to Phoenix, Arizona. There's a big Chaldean population in Arizona as well, and they also have the same type of businesses.
Next up, we have a conversation with two members of the family who made radio broadcasting history with the creation of WCHB and WCHD radio stations. WCHB was the nation's first African-American owned and operated radio station built from the ground up. And WCHD, which later became WJZZ, was the first jazz radio station. One Detroit's Bill Kubota has the story.
Motown founder Berry Gordy. His family came to Detroit from Georgia in the 1920s, around the same time Dr. Haley Bell arrived.
Grandpa Bell came to Detroit in 1923. He's from Brunswick, Georgia. He was born in 1895, and Mary Bell, his wife, she was born in Lebanon, Tennessee, which is outside of Nashville, in 1900.
Another great migration story. Annette Bass came to Michigan Central last year to tell us about Bell Broadcasting for our Destination Detroit project.
Grandma Bell said they put 3 cities in a hat, and one was Texas. I think the third one was West Virginia, and Detroit was second. So they drew Detroit twice, so they decided to come to Detroit.
3 decades later, Dr. Bell, a successful dentist, had saved up to build a radio station, partnering with sons-in-law Wendell Cox and Robert Bass. WCHB 1440 AM's first broadcast, November 7th, 1956.
What many researchers and historians argue, if there had not been WCHB that launches in 1956, there would not be a Motown Records.
Coming to you live from WCHB, it's most definitely the Joltin' J-O-E, getting down to the nitty in this Detroit city.
And I can remember Berry Gordy coming over to my house when we lived down Lafayette Park back in the 60s with 2 or 3 445s in his hand, asking my father, Dr. Bass, Can you please see if you can get these on the air next week for me?
If they were airworthy, Eric Bass said WCHB would play them first, before the other Detroit stations would get a chance.
Dr. Bell was a dentist. He set up his dental office in Hamtramck. Dr. Cox, my uncle, set up his office down the street near Holbrook. My grandfather's office is near Caniff. And when my father got out of dental school, he set up shop in my grandfather's office, also on Joseph Campbell. So all three of them operated there, 3 black dentists servicing the 90% population of Polish people back in the 50s and 60s.
Doctors Bell, Bass, and Cox owned the first black-owned radio station in the USA, built from the ground up.
Then my grandfather, he wanted to get into broadcasting because Detroit's black population was booming in those days. It was growing exponentially. The Great Migration brought a lot of black people from the South to Detroit, and there was no television, no radio targeting them specifically. He applied for a FCC license for a building permit to build a station in Detroit to target the black audience. He was denied multiple times back in the 50s.
The Federal Communications Commission wouldn't let them in Detroit, but they got the okay in Inkster, west of the city. Annette Bass's husband, Bobby Bass, along with brother Eric Bass, became Bell Broadcasting executives. With few family members left, Annette's trying to preserve the Bell broadcast legacy.
I mean, all those are archive boxes down there. Those are all family members. I mean, these are files. Those are employee files over there. When my husband passed in 2013, he left me with all this material. Most of it he inherited from his grandmother.
WCHB, Detroit Soul Radio.
WCHB, the soul of the city. 1440 WCHB.
And it covered the news for the black audience.
June of 63?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King did his first version of I Have a Dream.
It was 2 weeks after Medgar Evers was assassinated.
And they had a march in Detroit, because I remember I got tired of walking. My dad put me on his shoulders, and we walked from like the boulevard all the way to Jefferson. That was a long way. And then after the march, everybody went to Cobo Hall. And that's when he first did his first version of I Have a Dream.
WCHB, there to put it on the air.
And so his rural plantation background gradually gave way to urban industrial life.
Well, this is pretty unique, man. My grandfather couldn't have pulled this off any other place, in my opinion. Detroit was a once-in-a-lifetime deal, you know. That's why coming to Detroit, we probably wouldn't have enjoyed this success anywhere else.
WCHB radio talent then, in binders now, 60 years later. Who are they? Annette Bass wants to put names to the faces.
I said, if anybody recognizes,
people.
Yeah, please write their name down.
You
because
know who
I
these
have
people are? Some of them. Now check this dude out. This cat named Robbie D. He was a white jock, obviously, that worked for WCHB back in the 60s.
Time magazine featured Mr. Hip Lip, Robbie D. in 1967.
Temptations on WCHB. Rock and Robbie D shows what's happening for you. This is WCHB, Inkster, Michigan, loudly and proudly serving all of greater Detroit land, 1,440 minutes a day.
One of his things was, shut your trap, sit on my lap, and inhale my rap, baby. That was a little...
So you can't say that now.
Now, he was working for a black-owned and operated radio station in the mid-60s, man. This cat was ahead of the time.
Bell Broadcasting put FM station WCHD on the air in 1960. Not many FM listeners then. WCHD played jazz, and Annette's late husband, Bobby, helped run the operation, gathering a faithful audience.
That's why you have to have people who are really locked into that. That was Bobby's strength. Bobby really understood jazz music.
There was another jazz station in Connecticut, programmed by pianist Dave Brubeck of Take 5 fame, called WJZZ. But in the early 70s, it gave up its call letters and Bell Broadcasting took them. WCHD renamed WJZZ with the station's marketing man Eric Bass helping roll out their iconic logo.
I saw that and said, Bobby, that's it. That's the radio station. That's who we want to be. That's who we want people to see, WJZZ, and think about Detroit. And it was so prolific that when it hit, we said, we're going to put this on hats, we're going to put it on shirts, we're going to put it on billboards.
American FM, WJZZ Detroit, Jazz 106.
By the 1980s, jazz radio evolved into smooth jazz with WJZZ on top. recognized nationally for its programming and tie-ins with the likes of concerts at Cheyne Park and the Montreux Detroit Jazz Festivals.
That's from 81.
There was always a smooth jazz show down at the Fox, a smooth jazz show down at the Orchestra Hall, a smooth jazz function here, a smooth jazz function, until the format became, until it didn't generate enough money. Then they immediately, overnight, gone.
Radio in transition. Bell Broadcasting forced to adapt.
So small, independently owned families like mine, you had to do one of two things. You either had to get bigger to compete, or they're going to squeeze you out. And we hung for a long time and competed.
Bell Broadcasting sold its stations in 1998, but the history's still here, with Annette Bass sorting it out.
This family was very unique. They were like radio royalty. That's what I consider them, radio royalty.
Detroit PBS produced an hour-long documentary titled Destination Detroit, which highlights our region's history and its connection to the nation's evolving story. The film features interviews with more than 60 people. It can be viewed at detroitpbs.org/Destination Detroit or on the PBS app. Here's a preview. Detroit's iconic train station at Michigan Central, full of history, American history. It's been called the Ellis Island of the Midwest.
My family came to Detroit via my grandmother.
Everybody comes from somewhere.
And she came from Natchez, Mississippi. She came on train.
People gathered at the train station to share their migration stories.
My grandparents were born in Pforzheim in Germany, and my dad was actually born there as well. And they immigrated to Detroit in 1954. So I'm first-generation American on my dad's side.
I came as a refugee from Burundi. I've been here since November 2015.
Detroit PBS presents Destination Detroit. Stories from people who came here and built the Motor City.
Detroit, we always think about its population loss, and it's lost more population than any other city. It grew faster than any other city in the country.
It becomes this major city that's growing so fast because of the automotive industry. The African American population in Detroit skyrockets.
New travel luxury in every Ford car.
Detroit was vast and wide. Both of my grandfathers felt that it was imperative to get somewhere that was hustle and bustle.
The legacy of the American auto worker carries on to this day.
I come from labor. Labor is in my blood. It comes from the history of my family.
My grandfather and my mom's family, they come over here in 1974 at the time when the Lebanese Civil War was about to start, but also for the opportunity at pursuing the American dream.
America at 250, our country's anniversary, a time to look to the future and reflect on our past.
My mother's family is from Zacatecas, Mexico.
You know, this neighborhood has been revitalized many times over by new families coming in. They don't know any of this.
We have to tell our own story.
After the war, about 100,000 Holocaust survivors come to the United States, and about 4,000 of them settle here in Michigan.
We boarded the ship Queen Elizabeth, and it took us about 5 days to get to New York. Finally, I got to Detroit. I felt better, much better there.
So my father, he was a South Vietnamese military personnel. He came to Michigan in 1975.
We are nomadic beings. We've always been moving. And so we're moving in search of opportunity. We're moving in search of liberation and freedom. We're moving in search of a pursuit of excellence.
One of the stories in the Destination Detroit documentary focuses on the settlers who migrated to Michigan from New England and upstate New York in the 1800s. They were known as Yankee Yorkers, and many of them had a huge influence on politics and economics in the Detroit area. The Erie Canal opened Detroit to more people out east.
Most of Detroit and Michigan's early Euro-American settlers trace their origins to New England and upstate New York. And it is no coincidence that we have in the Detroit metropolitan area a number of communities whose names can also be found in upstate New York. Utica, Troy, Farmington, Livonia, Rochester. All of those communities were named for the points of origin for the people who settled there early on. People often talk about the importance of Yankee Yorker culture in early Michigan.
One Yankee Yorker sitting pretty? Hazen Pingree, Detroit mayor and Michigan governor in the 1890s, hailing from the state of Maine.
Individuals who trace their origins to that migration thread control the city well into the late 19th century in terms of politics and economics. One example is the Joy family. James Joy, one of the movers and shakers that helps to create Michigan's early railroads, the Michigan Central Railroad, makes a fortune in railroads. He originated from New Hampshire. His son, Henry Born Joy, is one of the founders of Edison Company and the founder of Packard Motor Company. Here's one family whose name is very familiar to Detroiters. There's Joy Road, after all. People still have recollections of the Packard plant and where it sat up on East Grand Boulevard. And the railroad, the Michigan Central Railroad Depot, that was the railroad that James Joy started. But this is a family that was very influential well into the 20th century.
Another segment in the documentary features Dearborn Mayor Abdullah Hammoud, sharing how his family settled in the city that's home to the Ford Motor Company. It also has the largest concentration of Arab Americans in the U.S. Dearborn. It sits right on the border of Detroit. It's home to Ford Motor Company and the first Arab American majority city in the United States.
My grandfather and my mom's family, they come over here in 1974, at the time when the Lebanese Civil War was about to start, but also for the opportunity at pursuing the American dream. My mother was about 4 years old. She came over here and obviously entered the school system at the time, and for my grandfather, just a regular laborer, while waiting for a job on the line, found a job at a local bakery, making $50 a week. And it was that kind of held him over until he found a good paying job on the line. Dearborn is home to about 110,000 people, the fastest growing city in Michigan according to the last decennial census, about 12% growth. 50% of the residents here are foreign born. After the war in Iraq, you saw a large migration of Iraqi nationals to southeast Michigan, and so we have a large Iraqi American community. With the civil strife that is persistent in Yemen, you see a large Yemeni migration. And within the Dearborn community in particular, amongst the large Arab American communities, the largest I would say is about the Lebanese and the Yemeni community, and then you kind of have the Iraqi community, and then a scattering of Syrian, Palestinian, Jordanian going across the Middle East and North African border. My father's story, slightly different. He came over here in the early 80s, born and raised in Saudi Arabia, although Lebanese. Ultimately, my father, for most of my young age, was a trucker delivering the seats for the F-150. The best truck in America. I have to say that. I also believe it because I drive one.
Let's turn now to Detroit's Chinese community. Many of the city's first Chinese residents arrived at the turn of the last century. In this story from Destination Detroit, Sandy Fatt of the Detroit Chinatown Vision Committee talks about the legacy of the city's Chinatown and her efforts to preserve and revive the neighborhood.
You look at all of the people in Detroit, almost all of the business and restaurants were all Cantonese because they all came from Canton, China.
The history of the Chinese in Detroit starts here. Central United Methodist Church, downtown on Woodward.
A Central Methodist Church had these missionaries that came to Canton, China, invited the Chinese people to come to Detroit, and the church would help them get established. So in the late 1800s, Chinese people started coming. The city gave them this area by 3rd and Michigan for their community. And by the 1930s or 40s, there were like 4,000 people living in Chinatown. And then in 1960, they decided to build the Bagley Road exit off of the lodge. So they were saying they have to move you for urban development.
The end for the next Chinatown at Cass and Peterborough inevitable. It tried hanging on, but by the 80s, most of the original residents were gone.
We were living in the suburbs, doing what all immigrant families wanted for their children, to get educated, get good jobs, start their own businesses, and move to the suburbs.
In 2023, one of the last historic Detroit Chinatown buildings was demolished. Asian American groups and community leaders are now planning what might be a Pan-Asian cultural district in the future.
You can't make up for what you didn't do before, but you can make up for what you're going to do now. And that's what we're trying to do, is revitalize a neighborhood that's been basically abandoned, honoring our ancestors and the work and the risks that they took, especially these women that were not valued then, and come over to this country and raise all of these children that became the Chinese population in Detroit.
Again, you can see the Destination Detroit documentary at detroitpbs.org/Destination Detroit or on the PBS app. That'll do it for this week's show. Thank you for watching. Head to the One Detroit website for all the stories we're working on, follow us on social media, and sign up for our newsletter.
Across our Masco family of companies, our goal is to deliver better living possibilities and make positive changes in the neighborhoods where we live, work, and do business. Masco, a Michigan company since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit PBS.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit PBS. Through our giving, we are committed to meeting the needs of the communities we serve statewide to help ensure a bright and thriving future for all. Learn more at dtefoundation.com.
Nissan Foundation, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and viewers like you.